morning. You're watching DD India and I'm Preeti presenting this edition of the news. First, the top stories. 27th session of Conference of Parties of the UNFCCC to begin today. Union Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Bhupendra Yadav arrives at Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt to attend COP27. US is heading for the midterm Senate election scheduled for November 8, which involves three critical contests. Democrat John Fetterman versus Republican celebrity Dr. Mehmet Oz, along with Georgia and Nevada. These will determine whether Democrats hold on to their razor-thin majority in the Senate and with it the power to confirm Biden's nominees to the posts ranging from his cabinet to the Supreme Court. The Ukrainian president dismisses talks of limited supplies of drones by Iran to Russia. On Saturday, Iran acknowledged for the first time that it had supplied Moscow with drones, but said they were sent before the war in Ukraine. Over 1,000 protesters take over the streets in Ghana, calling for the resignation of the president, Nana Akufo-Addo, aimed at economic crisis that has hammered the cedi currency and has seen fuel and food costs spiral to record levels. India will take on Zimbabwe in their last Super 12 match in the ICC T20 World Cup. Today, England beat Sri Lanka by 4 wickets in Group 1's final Super 12 match to make it to the semi-finals. Alright, those are the top stories. Let's get to the news in detail now. Environment Minister Bhupendra Yadav, who leads the Indian delegation at the 27th session of Conference of Parties of the UNFCCC, beginning today at Sharm el-Sheikh, will seek action on key issues related to climate finance, technology transfer and loss and damage. According to the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, at the meet, India will discuss the mantra of Lifestyle for Environment or LIFE coined by Prime Minister Modi. Meanwhile, the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt will host the COP27 from 6 to 18th November. We get you a preview of the summit and its agenda ahead.
Amidst much cacophony on the issue of climate change, the enablers of change are trying to put their best foot forward with acceptance, dialogue and a pledge for action. At the COP27 summit kicking off in Egypt on Sunday, 197 countries will initiate negotiations in the coastal city of Sharm el-Sheikh to mark the beginning of the annual United Nations Climate Change Conference. The agenda: how to abate and adapt to the effects of climate change. On the summit's agenda will be loss and damage, compensation to climate vulnerable countries already suffering from climate-related weather extremes. Developing countries are increasing demands for wealthier, carbon-emitting nations to pay for climate-induced disasters like floods and fires. November's COP27 climate negotiations will address issues including energy transition and food security. Ambassador Mohammed Nasser, lead negotiator of COP27 presidency, highlighted the urgency of bridging the gap and scaling up climate finance across all sectors.
There is a need for a transformation in the thinking when it comes to delivering of climate finance. Transformation in the thinking meaning that for private sector they need to move from the idea of a bankable project to idea of a project that is benefiting climate and livelihoods. So it is not about making profit, it's making impact, positive impact on the ground. Many countries, many developing countries are already facing a burden of debt. Let's work on putting baselines and have a progression that we agreed to in Paris.
Special representative of COP27 President Wael Abul Magh speaks to the opportunities that come along with COP27 being in Africa in terms of responding to the needs and advancing homegrown initiatives and also supporting just transition.
Globally, we have in store a number of adaptation-related initiatives, be it very specific to the field of food security, issue of water resource management, but also on the capacity building side, because that's the starting point. If you don't have the capacities, the national capacities to implement adaptation relief programs, you have a serious problem.
Britain's King Charles hosted a reception at Buckingham Palace to discuss climate change ahead of the COP27 summit. More than 200 politicians and business leaders attended the event, including British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, opposition Labour leader Keir Starmer, US climate envoy John Kerry, and COP26 President Alok Sharma. Often outspoken on climate change, Charles would not attend the COP27 UN Climate Summit in Egypt. India has already set itself tougher targets for cutting carbon dioxide emissions and increasing its clean energy generation capacity by 2030, largely off the back of significant progress in its solar power industry. Union Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change Bhupendra Yadav will be leading Indian delegation at 27th session of Conference of Parties of the UNFCCC. India will emphasize on its invitation to all countries to join the Life Movement Lifestyle for Environment. Meanwhile, Australia will launch a bid with Pacific nations to host the United Nations Climate Summit in 2026. Australia has lagged behind developed countries on its climate action, with the former government of Scott Morrison resisting pressure to set more ambitious carbon emissions targets at last year's Glasgow Climate Summit. With the world bearing the brunt of catastrophic effects of climate change, there is a dire need to back dialogues with substantial actions. The time for climate action is now, and we all have a role to play. DD India.
In the US, the key races remain tight during the final days of campaigning ahead of the 2022 midterms. The biggest names in Democratic and Republican politics, Joe Biden, Barack Obama and Donald Trump, joined the candidates, hoping to tip the balance in many of the closely contested midterm races that could determine the control of the US Senate, as well as governor contests that would affect the behavior of future elections. Control of the US Senate is at stake in the November 8 midterm elections, as Republicans need to pick up only one seat to win control of the 100-seat chamber, which would allow them to block much of President Joe Biden's agenda. The chamber is currently split 50-50 between Republicans and Democrats, who are able to control the agenda thanks to Vice President Kamala Harris's tie-breaking vote. Democrats hope to expand their margin. Days after US blamed Pyongyang of covertly supplying weapons to Moscow to aid its war in Ukraine, a Washington-based think tank released footage of a train crossing North Korea into Russia. The 38 North Project, which monitors North Korean developments, said that it was the first time such a train movement had been observed on the route in several years, although Russia's veterinary service reported on Wednesday that a train had crossed the border into North Korea carrying horses. It said that North Korea closed the 800-meter Tumangang Friendship Bridge, the only land link between the countries, in February 2020 during the COVID pandemic. Blistering fight between forces of Russia and Ukraine continues in the eastern city of Bakhmut. The city's vice mayor said that Bakhmut is now the most intense front of the war. Russian forces repeatedly launched attacks against Bakhmut and nearby Avdiivka in the Donetsk region, but are being pushed back. This is what Kiev says, and it has reported heavy losses. He said that despite the daily crossfire, around 12 to 15,000 civilians remain in the city as compared to the 80,000 residents who lived there before start of the war. More than 120 civilians have been killed within the city since February. Bakhmut has been an important target for Russia's armed forces in the slow advance through the Donetsk region since Russia took the industrial towns of Lysychansk and Severodonetsk in June and July.
According to the General Staff, the Bakhmut front line is the most intense. Unfortunately, the enemy is trying to storm the city from several directions. There is ongoing fighting on the outskirts of the city. Ukrainian armed forces are firmly holding the front line and are not allowing the enemy to advance deeper and enter the city.
Meanwhile, in northeastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, people queued outside a mobile laboratory to collect their DNA samples in a bid to identify the victims of Izium mass burials. Mobile laboratory was set up with the help of the French government in the region. Last month, the bodies of 436 people were exhumed from a burial site in the northeastern town of Izium after it was liberated. As per local authorities, most appear to have died violent deaths. In a stern response to Iran's admission of supplying drones to Russia, but only before the invasion, Ukrainian President accused Tehran of lying and terrorist cooperation by supporting Moscow's offensive in Ukraine. In a video address, Zelenskyy said that Kiev's forces were downing at least 10 of the unmanned aerial vehicles every day, including downing 11 drones on Friday alone. Zelenskyy also warned Iran about its support for Russia, saying this would backfire.
By the way, official Iranian representatives have released a statement today. They have decided to admit that they did supply drones for Russian terror, but they were lying in this recognition as well. We are shooting down at least 10 Iranian drones daily. While the Iranian regime claims that it allegedly provided few of them before the start of the full-scale invasion, only during one day yesterday, 11 Shaheeds were destroyed. We know for certain that Iranian instructors have been teaching the Russian terrorists how to use drones, and Tehran is completely silent about it. If Iran continues to lie about the obvious, it means that the world will put even more efforts to investigate the terrorist cooperation between the Russian and Iranian regimes and what Russia pays Iran for such cooperation. In the modern world, there will be no such thing as terrorists or their accomplices going unpunished.
Western officials have accused Iran of supplying drones to Russia and of providing personnel on the ground to train Russian drone pilots. The West believes Russia has used Iranian kamikaze drones to hit key infrastructure sites in Ukraine. Previously, Tehran denied the acquisitions, but on Saturday, Iran's foreign minister said that a small number of the vehicles had been sent to Moscow. However, Iranian minister insisted the transfer came before Moscow's offensive on Ukraine began in February.
The fuss that has been started by Western countries that the Islamic Republic of Iran has provided Russia with missiles and drones to aid in the Ukraine war, the missile part is entirely false. The drone part is correct. We provided a limited number of drones to Russia many months prior to the Ukraine war. We agreed with the foreign minister of Ukraine for them to provide us with any evidence that Russia has been using Iranian drones in Ukraine. We had an agreement with Ukraine 2 weeks ago to be held in a European nation. Our political delegation was sent to the country, but unfortunately, in the final moments, the Ukrainian side did not show up. The reason was that the United States and some European nations, especially Germany, had told Ukraine, "We want to drink coffee with the Iranians in a European nation while we are trying to impose sanctions due to drones."
Iranian foreign minister said that Tehran and Kiev agreed to discuss existing evidence of the use of Iranian drones in Ukraine 2 weeks ago, but the Ukrainians did not show up at the agreed meeting. He assured of not being indifferent if usage of Iranian drones by Moscow is proven.
Of course, it is proven to us that Russia has used Iranian drones in the Ukraine war. We will not remain indifferent towards this matter.
In Ghana, enraged by economic crisis, hundreds of protesters marched through Accra on Saturday, demanding the resignation of President Nana Akufo-Addo. Surging fuel prices and food crisis have sparked protests in the West African nation. Fuel and food costs have spiraled to record levels, with inflation topping 37% in September, a 21-year high. Meanwhile, Ghana's currency, the cedi, has plummeted 40% against the dollar this year. Akufo-Addo sought to reassure the Ghanaians last week, saying authorities would get the country's finances back on track. The government is in talks with the International Monetary Fund for billions of dollars to prop up the economy. Spree of missile launches by North Korea and allied military drills between US and South Korea forces, in fact, continue to stoke tensions in the Korean peninsula. In the latest development, the US Air Force deployed B-1B strategic bombers in their joint vigilant storm air drills with Seoul. South Korea's defense ministry released a video showing B-1B strategic bomber taking off a tarmac at an unidentified airbase. The move has come after North Korea fired a barrage of weapon tests in recent days to protest against the Allied military drills. Seoul and Washington have been holding the air drills since Monday, which were extended by a day to Saturday in response to what the Allies call continued provocations by North Korea. And up next, we'll take a look at what else is making news around the world in our segment World Wrap.
In Spain, police said on Saturday that they seized 32 tons of packaged marijuana with a street value of at least 64 million euros, which they said was the largest amount ever found in Spain or internationally. The gang dried the marijuana plants, packaged them and sent them to parts of Spain, Switzerland, Holland, Germany and Belgium. Police raided a series of farms and production plants across Spain in an operation called Gardens. Police arrested 9 men and 11 women who were aged between 20 and 59. None of them were named. In Malaysia, political leaders began their election campaigning on Saturday for what is said to be a close race, with incumbent Prime Minister Ismail Sabri facing off with veterans Anwar Ibrahim and Muhyiddin Yassin. Around 21 million Malaysians are eligible to vote in the November 19 election, with inflation and recent political instability on the top of their minds in the backdrop of a slowing economy. Malaysia has had 3 premiers since the last election in 2018. Kenya Airways confirmed it was experiencing disruptions to its flight schedule after its pilot union began a strike on Saturday, despite the government urging them to call it off. The strike, which was due to start at 6 AM local time, will affect thousands of businesses and leisure travelers at one of the most important aviation hubs in the African continent. The pilots' union had said earlier it would call a strike over a dispute on pension contributions and settlement of deferred pay for its members after a 14-day notice had passed without the airline's management addressing their grievances.
And up next, we're heading for a short break. When we come back, we'll get you sports updates.
As the day unfolds and news and events take shape, we get you complete coverage of every news breaking in, tracking new developments as they happen. Midday Prime English, Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. on DD India. Your window to rising India. India's voice on global platforms. Latest news from India and around the world. In-depth analysis of global headlines. Watch DD India in your country. Available for downlink in Central Asian countries. STTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT 17 at 93.5 degrees east. HDTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT 10 at 83 degrees east. For technical details, scan here. Switch to DD India now.
Welcome back after the break. And in sports, Team India will take on Zimbabwe in the last match of the Super 12 in ICC Men's Cricket World Cup today. Now, this is the first time that India and Zimbabwe are playing each other in a T20 World Cup. India defeated Bangladesh in their last game in a close encounter, and now they will look to cement their place in the last 4.
India would look to secure their semi-final berth and top their group when they square off against spirited Zimbabwe in their last game of Super 12. Rohit Sharma-led side has been in fantastic form and played some remarkable cricket that saw them triumph over Pakistan, Netherlands and Bangladesh, although they faced loss against South Africa. Team India is currently placed at the top of the points table with 6 points in 4 matches in Group 2. India, South Africa, Pakistan and Bangladesh are currently in contention for the race to semi-finals. However, only 2 teams will make the last 4. If South Africa and Pakistan win their final group matches, India cannot afford to drop points against Zimbabwe. Both these sides haven't met in a T20 international since 2016, and this is the first time that both teams are playing against each other in a T20 World Cup. Talking about the head-to-head records, both teams have faced each other 7 times, with India winning 5 and Zimbabwe 2 games. For India, Virat Kohli has been in the form of his life with the bat, and he is the leading run scorer in the tournament so far. With 350s in 4 games, Virat Kohli has been dismissed just once in the campaign and he has enjoyed the conditions in Australia. Arshdeep Singh has been India's best bowler in the tournament with able support from Bhuvneshwar Kumar and Mohammad Shami. The left-arm seamer has been swinging the new ball both ways up front and has stepped in whenever the team needed him. With 9 wickets in 4 games, Arshdeep will be looking to add few more to his column. Zimbabwe might be out of the tournament following their defeat to Netherlands, but they have put in spirited performance throughout. After dominating the qualifying tournament, they topped their group in the first round at the World Cup and defeated strong teams like Pakistan in the Super 12s to give themselves a shot at the semi-finals. However, their batting let them down in the subsequent games. With their attacking style of play, Zimbabwe have won millions of hearts, especially back home. On Sunday, they have a chance to sign off in style against India in what could be a full house at the Melbourne Cricket Ground.
Sharma's men need to ensure their campaign is on track. Remember, Zimbabwe have already beaten Pakistan and caused a major upset, and they had a very close encounter with Bangladesh too. With cameraman Rakesh Kumar, this is Abhishek Mahajan in Melbourne for DD India.
And Indian pugilist Meenakshi and Preeti registered contrasting wins to secure semi-final berths and assure themselves of medals in their maiden appearance at the Asian Boxing Championships in Jordan on Saturday. While Meenakshi in 52 kg category defeated 4-time Southeast Asian Games medalist Philippines Irish Magno 4-1 in the quarterfinal, Preeti in the 57 kg category produced a spirited performance against Turdibekova Sitora of Uzbekistan to win her last 8 bout for 5-0. Meenakshi will face Mongolia's Lutsekhan Altansetseg, while Preeti will take on Japan's Iri Sena in the semi-finals on November 9th. Also assuring herself of a medal was World Championship bronze medalist Perveen in the 63 kg category, who registered a unanimous win over Panpachara or Somnyuk of Thailand in the quarterfinal. On to tennis now. Paris Masters, where the 21-time Grand Slam champion Novak Djokovic beat Stefanos Tsitsipas for the 8th straight time, edging an entertaining semi-final 6-2, 3-6, 7-6. With this win, he stays on track for a record-extending 7th Paris Masters title on Saturday. Serbia's 6-time champion next faces unseeded Danish teenager Holger Rune, who has never been in the Masters final. Djokovic is also aiming for a record-extending 39th Masters title, a 5th title this season and a 91st career overall, to move one behind 22-time major winner Rafael Nadal. While Rune, who won both of his career titles this year, reached his 4th straight final of the season. Earlier, Holger Rune booked his spot in the Paris Masters final on Saturday following a dominant straight sets win over 8th seed Felix Auger-Aliassime. Also, the Dane saw off his Canadian opponent 6-4, 6-2 to reach a maiden final at an ATP Masters 1000 event. With both playing for a place in their 4th straight ATP Tour final, the world number 18 converted 3 of 8 break points en route to victory in 88 minutes. That's it in this edition of the news this hour. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.